This is Daniel, lesson 4, Daniel 2. And here we're looking at the judgment last week, the things that the little horn will do. And this little horn, you remember, the little horn in chapter 7 is the Antichrist. We'll get to the little horn in chapter 8, but right now, chapter 7 is the Antichrist. His dominion of the little horn shall be taken away. Of course, that happens when Jesus returns. If you look at the chart here on the wall, it talks about the rock that will come down and break up the kingdoms. Kingdom and greatness of the kingdoms under heaven shall be given to the saints of the Most High. This is where we will rule and reign with Christ for the millennial kingdom. And this is where the rewards, and I believe that we should actively be seeking every single reward that God wants for us to have. And that's not a matter of pride or one-upment, you know, I got more than you do, but to do anything and everything we can for God. And God tells us that when we do that, if you're faithful over little, then you'll reign over much. Those that are not faithful, God will take away their part and give it to someone else. So, you know, it's not like in the millennial kingdom you're going to be embarrassed, but you still want to do whatever you can for God. It'll be interesting to see, it may be sad, I don't know, when we get to the millennial kingdom, to see people that we thought weren't much, who actually were faithful over much. And those we thought highly of, like, you know, man, this is the greatest Christian that ever walked the earth, and may find that they're, you know, sweeping floors, I don't know, kind of thing. I mean, it won't be as bad as that, but like I'm saying, our judgment is much different than God's judgment. Because we judge people on not only things they do, but whether we like them or dislike them, or personality, what have you. God judges righteously, the only one. Kingdom will be everlasting kingdom, dominion shall serve him. Then chapter 8 now is the vision of the ram and goat. This is important to tear down and to think about chapter 7 and think about chapter 8. The statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of the head of gold, chest and arms of silver, Grecian Empire, and then the Roman Empire will come in. All right, that's well, it's going to be different than this one, right? I'm trying to know how to word this correctly without confusion. You know, I'm confusing. I'm trying to figure it out. It's important to pay a lot of attention to the animals here, of which animals we're talking about, because they're different than chapter 7 and chapter 8. The date of the vision here would have been about 548 BC. This is 2 years after the vision that Daniel had, chapter 7. In the third year of Belshazzar. So remember, the first vision's in the first year of Belshazzar, so 2 years later, this vision. Daniel saw himself in Shushan, the palace, also known as Susa, which was the winter capital of the Persian kings. A lot of times, and I do this all the time, I shouldn't, but I do it, and that most preachers, I think, do. They talk about the Babylonian captivity of Israel that they went in, and 70 years later they were allowed to come back out of Babylon. When technically that's not true, because by that time it wasn't Babylon anymore, it was Persia. So they went in Babylonian captivity, they came out of Persia. So, see the territory there of the Babylonian Empire, pretty good sized territory, especially in those days. He saw a two-horned ram standing beside the river. And so we're in Persia now, so the location of the river typically would be the Euphrates. what we're talking about here. The horns were high, with one higher than the other, which came up last. Now, this is where you got to be careful, because when you first read that, and I do when I first read it, I think of the bear, where one side is higher than the other. This is not talking about the bear. This is not talking about the Medo-Persian Empire here. Right? So that's why you have to really think about each chapter and get it in proper context. So the horns are high, one higher than the other, came up last. The ram was pushing toward the north, west, north, and south. Nobody could defeat it. None could deliver from his hand. And he did according to the way that he wanted to do things. Right. He saw one horned male goat, unicorn. The Bible does talk about unicorns, and there are unicorns in the world today. They're just not the horse and everybody thinks of it as a unicorn. But any animal with one horn would be a unicorn. A rhinoceros would be a unicorn. This horn came up suddenly from the west.
Okay, quick question. Are the stuff that you've just done, are they on handouts?
No.
Okay, but I'm not writing that fast, so I missed.
Oh,
I
okay.
know, I know.
I was just, yeah, I didn't.
I can print these out.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I can do that because it's a lot of writing. I get.
Okay.
And
On the
I was
handout,
going.
I'm missing something. Okay.
I don't like to print stuff out all the time because, to me,
I don't,
I learn
do
better by
better
writing
writing,
and
yeah.
seeing.
Yeah.
So, you know, a certain amount of writing, but I also know that sometimes the writing can be overwhelming.
no, it's not,
You
you were
get
just
caught
going
up
really,
in-
really fast, and
I
I was
did.
like, did you get a, was it in a handout, because then I would look for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually try to slow down. But,
Oh, she writes fast.
Yes,
but anyway, so he comes up, the goat out of the west, one horned goat, cross surface the whole world, so not touching the ground, just symbolic language here. And then he saw the goat defeat the ram. Daniel 8. When the goat attacked the ram, he broke two of the horns of the ram and trampled the ram. And this is figurative language, but we know what it's talking about because we'll see that here in a bit. You've heard this statement for many times before, that the best commentary for the Bible is the Bible. And that is absolute truth. The best way to understand what this is talking about is that you find it in the Bible. It may not be in the same book, but other books you can find in books of the Bible. Commentaries can be helpful. Sometimes they can really be extremely misleading. You have to be careful about that. But the goat became great, and when he became strong, it says that God would tear him down here. So in its place, four notable ones came up, four horns came up. Large horn was broken, and four came up. Now, the goat here is the Grecian Empire that we talked about before. But the animal it kills is not the Roman Empire or the Medo-Persian Empire, say. But when the one horn's gone, then four horns come up in its place. So this is different kingdoms altogether now than in chapter 7. This is not Rome or Babylon or Persia or Greece or Rome. Okay? This is the one horn. Remember, the chapter 7 talks about the leopard who came in fast. It didn't last very long. It came in very fast, and that was Alexander the Great. Okay? When Alexander the Great died, what happened? Well, historically we know what happened, that his kingdom was given to 4 generals. Right? We have their names from history and all that. Cassander was one, Lycus was one. But they became 4 kingdoms. The large horn broken, 4 horns come up. And he saw a little horn. Picture is silly, the way the little horn is. But the little horn's coming up here. That's not the Antichrist, though. The Antichrist doesn't come up out of Greece. The Antichrist comes up out of the Roman Empire, the revised Roman Empire and the tribulation. So now this is the little horn. These little horns: Macedonia, Syria, Egypt, and Thrace. Syria, the little horn comes up out of Syria.
What do you mean when you say the revised Roman Empire? I don't quite
Well,
understand.
there is no Roman Empire today,
Mm-hmm.
but in the tribulation period there will be.
Okay.
There was before, historically. And so revived Roman empires, when it existed, it's dormant now, in a sense, and it'll be brought back in the tribulation.
Is that why they believe that the Antichrist or the false prophet is going to be a pope?
I think most of it is where a lot of Protestants think it's the Pope because the Pope's Catholic and they're not, so it's got to be them. Can't be one of our gang, so it's got to be theirs. Honestly, I think that's where they get it from. I don't know. I mean, it could be, but it also could be a Baptist, for all we know. So Daniel said he saw a little horn come up out of the 4 with great power. He grew exceedingly great toward south and east and toward the glorious land. Of course, that should be clear to you. The glorious land would be West Virginia, Israel. So just where the little horn comes out of is really important to note. That's why you can clearly see that chapter 7 little horn and chapter 8 are obviously 2 different little horns. And one comes out of the 10 in the tribulation period. This comes out of 4. So, the difference, well, because it's a different little horn. Exalts himself as high as the Prince of Hosts. So here's an extremely arrogant man. Sounds like the Antichrist. That's why people get it easily confused, because in a sense we could call this little horn the forerunner of the Antichrist. And that's why, so, on the surface, a quick view, you think, well, this is the same person. But then you realize, no, this one's coming up to warn Israel of what's going to happen when the true little horn comes up. As an example to them. What happens? Same things that will happen in the tribulation period. The daily sacrifices were taken away. That's happened historically. It's going to happen prophetically. The place of his sanctuary was cast down. Remember, this little horn goes into the temple, like the little horn of the tribulation went to the temple. The difference is the little horn of the tribulation proclaimed himself to be God. This little horn offers up a pig on the altar, which is total blasphemy to the Jews.
I know.
I think most people know that pigs are an abomination to the Jews, but there's a lot of other things that are too. That nobody knows, shrimp. But we don't think of that. We always think of pig. Why? Because the Jews, And what happened here with the pig? An army was given to him to oppose the daily sacrifices. Well, the Antichrist is going to have an army as well. He did all this and he prospered. So it sounds a lot alike, but that's why you have to pay attention to the details. Time is gone here, so I'll those. One screen, no, I'm going to take it down, we'll start with this next time. But just a quick thing, the daily sacrifice, transgression, desolation, sacrifice, and host to trample, 2,300 days, and then the sanctuary will be cleansed. Right? Remember the chart, book of Revelation? How many days in the last half of the trip?
1,600, I don't know,
1260.
1,260.
Right.
I knew it was up.
Total, 7 years.
Oh,
How many days in 7 years? It was 2,520.
20.
Right? So the Antichrist will reign for 2,520 days. This one will reign for 2,300 days. So you can see a distinction now between these two. And so next week we'll get more into that. Time's gone.